I'm going to welcome up my dear friend and esteemed pastor, Reverend Uki McIsaac. May her graceful words feed your spirit.
Thank you, Olivia. Oh, happy day. Did you really feel that music? Did you allow it to bring a smile? Even maybe your body started moving a little bit, yes? It's almost infectious, you can't help it, but you just have to swing to it. So, happiness and joy shall be our topic today. I will read you some words that you probably are very, very familiar with. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Declaration of Independence, 1776. So while in 1776 happiness may have meant something different than it does to us today, and there's quite some writing about that, and they say that today we focus more on pleasant, positive emotions and having our needs satisfied when we think of happiness. Whereas back then, the common meaning of that word may have been prosperity, thriving, well-being. Not so different, but don't we often find today that we crave happiness? We feel that something on the outside has to happen to make us inside happy. So we're chasing after happiness, after joy, and we never seem quite fulfilled in this chase. And only recently there has been a study that looked at where in the world do the happiest people live. Do you think it was in the US? Sorry to disappoint you. We're the world's biggest economy, but not the happiest country. So really high up there ranked the Nordic countries of Finland, Norway, and I think then Iceland and so Sweden, yes. So you know what place the US takes in that study? 18th place. And this is all from questioning people, in huge amounts in order to be statistically relevant. But they found that the biggest problems in our country is obesity, substance abuse, and depression. So obviously that would affect our sense of being happy and prosperous, our sense of well-being. So every religion has their own interpretation of what happiness or joy may mean. Now, when I'm using these two terms, of course they're not the same. I figured that happiness is sort of like an umbrella term, yes? It encompasses so many different emotions and states of being. And it's almost like you could move the dial, maybe the lowest dial of happiness could be contentment. Yeah? Is that okay? That's pretty good already. And then we can push that up, and when we come to joy, wow! That's like heard in that song, Joy. And I wanted to play that song, Oh Happy Day, to you. You may not relate to that Jesus washed away all of our sins, or you may. but that exuberance that comes from feeling that this happened to me. And in Christianity, very often, joy is defined as the joy of knowing God. Now, in Buddhism, for example, it has a very different interpretation. So here's a nice story that illustrates a little bit. It's about the life of Buddha. Listen to this. Once walking along the riverbank at the outskirts of Kusinara, wherever that is, the Buddha came across a young man who was gazing at the river and smiling to himself. "What are you thinking of, young man?" the Buddha asked. "I am thinking of living a wonderful life," the young man answered. "Then what makes a wonderful life?" "Say, one day I obtain a lot of riches and I marry the most beautiful woman there is. Then I get a dog and take a walk along this riverbank. I will sit down and enjoy the scenery. It will be a wonderful life." The Buddha said, "Haven't you gotten it already?" So this illustrates our chase for that state of happiness and how we always project it to be something in the future. At times, we always also go into the past. "Oh, I was happy then." Yes? Neither one is very productive, is it? We are asked to find our joy, our happiness now. I tell you another quick story that is an old Sufi story. You may have heard it. One night, a man was crawling around his hands and knees to look for something underneath a lamppost. When his friends saw him, they asked him what he was looking for, and he told them that he had lost the key to his house. So they all got down to help him look, but without any success. Finally, one of them asked him where exactly he had lost the key, and he replied, "In the house." "Then why," the friends asked, "are you looking underneath the lamppost?" The man replied, "Because there's more light here." You know, we may think that's silly, but again, what does this illustrate? We look in all the wrong places. Sometimes alcohol, drugs, and any other addiction can give us that momentary feeling of things are good right now. But it never produces lasting results, and it actually can get us into big trouble down the road, doesn't it? So it is at times really an interpretation. So this is one of my favorite jokes. I got to tell you this one. A young monk arrives at the monastery. He's assigned to helping the other monks in copying the old laws of the church by hand. He notices, however, that all of the monks are copying from copies, not from the original manuscript. So the new monk goes out to the head monk to question this, pointing out that if somebody made even a small error in the first copy, it would never be picked up. It would just be continued in all of the subsequent copies. The head monk says, "Well, you know, we've been copying from the copies for centuries. But, son, you make a good point." He goes down into the dark caves underneath the monastery where the original manuscripts are held as archives in a locked vault that hasn't been opened for hundreds of years. Hours go by, and nobody sees the head monk. So the young monk gets worried and goes down to look for him. He sees him banging his head against the wall and wailing, "We missed the R! We missed the R! We missed the R!" His forehead is all bloody and bruised, and he's crying uncontrollably. The young monk asked the head monk, "What's wrong, Father?" The head monk, with tears in his eyes, replied, "The word is celebrate, not celibate." So, sometimes we got it wrong for generations on end. So, to look just at another religious tradition, in the Hindu tradition, the notion of happiness is composed of bhakti and shakti. Bhakti is service, devotion, and shakti is power, creative ability. So through service, we can derive happiness. Isn't that true? That when we do something for someone else, that breaks this mad chase after personal happiness, and before we know it, making someone else happy makes us happy in a really deeply fulfilling way. And remember when it was very popular to see these signs about random acts of kindness. Yes? Remember that? It unfortunately has sort of faded a bit into the background. But what it really refers to is when we do something good for someone else without the need to be recognized or thanked for what we did. That's tough. That's tough. I talked with my husband about that the other day. And he sometimes, as he helps other people with home repairs, he sometimes makes little changes that were not asked for. He sees maybe an electrical outlet isn't working and hasn't been paid. He won't get paid for that, but hey, he throws this and never says a word about it. And he derives a personal sense of happiness from having done this little act of kindness. See, I was raised that when you do something for somebody, you have to expect something in return. So there was always strings attached to that. But that is a trap, isn't it? Because then when we don't get that gratitude, then we can even get resentful. I did such a nice thing for this person and she never thanked me. Ungrateful. What a trap that is. So that undermines that true happiness, doesn't it? So when we go back to the sense of joy, what does joy really mean to us? There are interesting synonyms to the word. I give you a few. Delight, great pleasure, jubilation. Wow, that's a strong word, right? That goes way beyond happiness on that scale, right? Exaltation, woohoo, rejoicing. Gladness, yeah, that's okay. Glee, we usually don't use that anymore. Exhilaration, exuberance, elation, euphoria. Ooh, that's pretty high on top. Bliss, ecstasy, rapture. So there you have the whole range. And just remember, it is nothing on the outside that can give you this feeling. It's an inside job, yes? So, when we think of joy, don't we often think of like the face of a child? A small child that has that innocence, looks at the smallest thing and what's the noise babies make? Squeal? Squeals with delight. And when you look at the eyes, that is pure joy, pure delight, unaltered by expectations, a need for gratitude, acknowledgement. No, it's the pure joy. So can we reclaim some of that joy? Because it goes away as we grow up, right? We become rational thinkers. There used to be an old song by Supertramp. When I was young, life was a miracle. Some of you may remember that. And then it goes through the lines of, then I grew up and I became logical, intellectual, eventually a vegetable. That's a little strong, but it's that not so fortunate progression from what it means to grow up. But you know what the good news is? That kid is still in there. That little girl, that little boy is inside. It is a part of ourself. But sometimes we lost access, right? And that child can be almost a little bit frozen in a bubble. Now, obviously, even children don't all have just wonderful, happy experiences. There may be some pain around that too. And that's yet another reason to make contact with that kid and bring him or her back out of this bubble. And that can be done in different ways. I use soul retrieval with my clients, but there are many creative exercises. And it can be as simple as give yourself room to be silly. Go to the beach and build a sandcastle. Your inner child will love it. Do anything creative, like going to Michael's and buy some frilly stuff and put it together in just a non-attached creative way. Because you know, creativity is another way to evoke that playfulness inside. Yes? Music, right? Do a search for happiest songs or songs about happiness. Oh my goodness, you will find hundreds. Pick your favorite ones, make a playlist. For me, Oh Happy Day, I mean that song, and it's not about the words, it's just that, the feeling. But you know, remember Bobby McFerrin? Don't worry, be happy. So there are so many things. You have the capacity to shift your body chemistry to a state of happiness. And that's scientifically proven. If you're curious, check out TED Talk sometime. There is really a lot of research done about what some scientists call synthetic happiness. Now that sounds a little weird. What do you mean synthetic? Well, it's not through synthetic substances or anything. No. What it means is when we don't get what we want, we create a sense of, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. And while this at first may seem phony, there are a lot of stories that validate that. The Beatles, when they first started, there were actually 6 or so of them. And there was one guy that played for them initially, and then I think something happened and they replaced him with Ringo Starr. Now they asked this guy, years later, you know, Beatles of course, had been on their success journey, and they asked this man, I don't remember his name, so what do you feel about that? You know, don't you regret that you weren't part of that world famous group? And he said, oh no, not being part of the Beatles was the best thing that ever happened to me. Now, it is not a phony statement, because they really proved through scientific experiments, and I don't want to go into the length of it, that when we don't get what we want, the brain creates a feeling that this was the best choice. And maybe you can even validate that, or when you see people who may have had something tragic happen, that in the moment seemed like gut-wrenching, heartbreaking. And when they take that tragedy and they transform it, and they create maybe an organization that does a lot of good in the world based on this loss they may have had, it's the best thing that ever happened. Yes? So know that your brain really has that capacity. It makes the dopamine and what other neurotransmitters are called. We have that inside of us. So don't poo-poo when you hear somebody, oh, you know, what you think was bad, no, it was the best thing. Because we have that ability. So, some people have interesting things to say. How about a joyful heart is good medicine? Remember how laughter can actually cure illness? That has also been proven a long time ago. But did you know that even lifting the corners of your mouth in a smile makes those brain chemicals of happiness? So that old saying of fake it till you make it, that's not that wrong. My yoga teacher always jokes when we get so serious about certain poses. You know, she says, and now for the advanced version of the pose, lift the corners of your mouth. You know? So, and I actually looked at you when we had that song, Oh Happy Day, and most of you were pretty serious. Because how often in church or in any kind of service are we invited to, you know, swing and sway and clap? It's not that common, right? I remember once I was on the big island of Hawaii, and there was this beautiful beach. It was a Sunday, lots of tourists, and the tourists mostly, you know, they read their books or they were on their iPhone, and they were sort of engrossed in their own thing. And the people from Hawaii, they came in a big clan and they had food, and then they took their fishing gear and they just had a blast. And I was sort of looking at them and envying them. And one of the people looked to his friend and says, you know, these haoles are the white people, these haoles look so unhappy. He was right. Here we were in paradise, and we were still not really interacting with each other. And that was a big lesson. The interaction, the social relating, that brings joy and happiness, yes? So I leave you with a couple more quotes. I love this one, Joseph Campbell. Find a place inside where there's joy, and the joy will burn out the pain. Isn't that a lovely image? The joy will burn out the pain. This from the Buddhist philosophy, thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. Joy, Buddha says, joy comes not through possession or ownership, but through a wise and loving heart. That which is false troubles the heart, but truth brings joyous tranquility. A quote by Rumi. So you see, there are so many flavors of this, what we sometimes think we have to seek outside of us and we chase after and may never find it. May you be empowered to awaken the kid within. Give yourself an ice cream if that's what your kid wants. Sing "Oh Happy Day" or wherever makes your heart happy, and have a wonderful, joyous day. Thank you.